The rain fell hard against the windows of the black car, blurring the city into streaks of silver and shadow. Dr. Elena Laurent sat in the back seat, her medical bag resting firmly on her lap. The driver had not spoken since he picked her up. He had not introduced himself, had not asked if she was comfortable. He had only opened the door for her outside her apartment and driven away without explanation. Elena looked through the rain-covered glass. She could see the faint outline of 2 vehicles ahead and 1 behind. Armed escorts. She noticed the small movements inside those cars, shadows shifting, heads turning. This was not a normal hospital call. They left the main roads and turned onto a narrow private route that curved uphill into Archeon district. The city lights disappeared behind tall gates and high walls. The road was quiet except for the sound of rain hitting the roof. The car slowed in front of a large, modern building with no sign on the entrance. Clean white stone. Dark glass. Guards at the doors. No name. No logo. The driver stepped out and opened her door. Elena took a slow breath before stepping into the rain. 2 men in dark suits stood by the entrance. Their faces were calm but alert. One of them gestured politely. "Dr. Laurent," he said softly. "This way." She walked inside. The interior surprised her. It did not look like a hospital. The floors were polished marble. Soft golden lights hung from the ceiling. Fresh white flowers were placed along the walls. The air smelled faintly of roses and antiseptic. There were no nurses rushing past. No reception desk. No patients waiting. Only more men in suits standing quietly. Elena tightened her grip on her bag. She reminded herself of one simple fact. Someone was dying. That was the only reason she was here. She was led down a long hallway to a private suite at the far end. The door opened. Inside stood Madame Kang Sujin. She was smaller than Elena expected. Slender. Dressed in a pale gray traditional jacket with a silver brooch pinned at the collar. Her posture was straight. Her expression calm but sharp. She studied Elena slowly from her shoes to her eyes as if measuring her. "Dr. Laurent," Sujin said in smooth, careful English. "Thank you for coming." "I was given very little choice," Elena replied evenly. A faint smile touched Sujin's lips. "My people are loyal." Elena did not answer. Across the room, behind a glass partition, she saw him. Adrian Kang lay unconscious on a hospital bed. Machines surrounded him. His chest rose and fell in shallow rhythm. Monitors beeped steadily but uncertainly. Tubes and wires connected to his body. He looked strong even now. Broad shoulders. Dark hair falling over his forehead. A face that suggested control and authority. But there was something fragile in the stillness of his body. "He has been like this for 3 days," Sujin said quietly as she stepped beside Elena. Elena moved closer to the glass and studied the monitors. Heart rate irregular. Oxygen low. Blood pressure unstable. "What happened?" she asked. "He was shot," Sujin said. "The bullet damage combined with a congenital heart defect he has carried since childhood. His doctors refused to operate. They said the risk was too high." Elena kept her eyes on the screens. "They may not be wrong." Sujin's voice did not change. "But you have done what others would not." Elena did not respond to that. She focused on the readings, calculating silently. "Rivals want him dead," Sujin continued. "If he does not survive, they will move against us." Elena finally turned to face her. "You brought me here to save a life. Or to protect your empire?" Sujin's gaze did not waver. "Both." There was a long silence. "I can offer you anything," Sujin said softly. "Funding for your research. A new surgical wing in your name. Protection. Prestige." Elena shook her head once. "I don't want your money." Sujin stepped closer. Her voice lowered. "Save my son," she said, "and I will make him marry you." The words hung in the air. Elena turned slowly, her expression sharp. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. I am a surgeon," Elena said firmly. "Not a reward. Not a transaction. Not something to be exchanged for services." Her voice remained calm, but anger flickered behind it. Sujin did not look offended. She looked thoughtful. "I do not offer it as an insult," she said. "I have watched women come and go from my son's life. Women who fear him. Women who want his power. Women who disappear when things become difficult." She paused. "You walked into this place tonight knowing what it is. You are still standing here. You are not afraid." Elena held her gaze. "I am here because someone is dying," she said. "Not because of any promise. Not because of marriage." Sujin nodded once. "Then save him." Elena turned back toward the glass. Adrian's heart rhythm stuttered slightly on the monitor. She could walk away. She could say no. This was dangerous, complicated, political, but she was a surgeon. She picked up her bag. I will operate, she said, because that is what I do. Nothing else. Sujin's eyes softened just slightly. Of course. I need a scrub room, Elena added. Now. The older woman stepped aside and gestured toward the adjoining corridor. Everything has been prepared. Elena did not look back again at Sujin. She walked toward the surgical wing, her steps steady despite the weight of the situation. The rain continued to fall outside, pounding against the silent building. Inside, the air felt tense and still. She pushed open the door to the scrub room and began washing her hands. In a few minutes, she would open Adrian Kang's chest and attempt what others had refused to try. She was not here for power. She was not here for promises. She was here because a heart was failing. And she intended to stop it from doing so. Elena Laurent had grown up near the southern coast of Marseille, in a small apartment above her father's clinic. Her childhood had been filled with the quiet sounds of medicine, phones ringing late at night, the soft turning of medical pages, the steady footsteps of patients climbing narrow stairs. Her parents believed deeply in education. They believed skill was protection, and knowledge was something no one could take away. From an early age, Elena had known she wanted to become a surgeon. Not because it sounded impressive, but because she had watched what steady hands and calm thinking could do. She studied harder than anyone around her. She did not look for shortcuts. She did not look for comfort. She wanted mastery. She attended Ridgewell School of Medicine, where she built a reputation for focus and discipline. During her residency in Eastbridge City, she worked in hospitals that were crowded and loud, where every shift felt like a battle against time. She saw violence, trauma, and fragile lives. She learned to move quickly without losing control. By the time she completed her training at Northgate Medical Institute, she was known for taking on cases others avoided. Complex cardiac repairs. High-risk valve replacements. Patients with little hope. She did not chase praise, but her name began to circulate in medical circles. When Velmora Central Medical Institute offered her a fellowship to study advanced cardiac reconstruction techniques, she accepted. Velmora City was modern and powerful, full of sharp buildings and sharper people. She focused only on her work. She refused gifts from wealthy families. She refused private offers that came with hidden expectations. She did not date men who tried to impress her with money or status. She valued skill, not power. That was who she was when she stood in the operating room at Eclipse Private Medical Pavilion. Adrian Kang had grown up in a very different world. He was the only son of the founder of the Kang Dominion. His father had built the organization with patience and strict discipline. When his father died 4 years ago, Adrian inherited everything: control, enemies, responsibility. He learned quickly that fear and respect kept order. He did not trust affection easily. 5 years earlier, he had been engaged to Clara Yoon, a woman he had cared about deeply. Weeks before the wedding, she disappeared. A rival faction had convinced her that leaving was safer than staying. Adrian had responded with force. The rival group paid for that interference. Since childhood, Adrian had carried a secret weakness. A congenital heart defect that had been carefully managed and carefully hidden. In his world, weakness was dangerous. Only a few trusted doctors knew the truth. When a bullet tore into his side during an attack 3 days earlier, it disrupted the fragile stability of his heart. The damage was worse than expected. The combination of trauma and defect pushed his body close to collapse. His regular doctors refused the operation. Now Elena stood above him under bright surgical lights. The surgery began. The room was silent except for the steady beeping of machines and the quiet instructions exchanged between professionals. Elena's hands moved with calm precision. She opened his chest carefully, layer by layer. At hour 2 she saw it. The internal damage was worse than the scans had shown. The tissue was more fragile. The bullet had caused more disruption than expected. For exactly 4 seconds she froze. Not from fear but from shock. 1, 2, 3, 4. She breathed in, steady and controlled. Then she continued. Pressure holding, the anesthesiologist said quietly. Elena adjusted her angle. Suction. The instrument appeared in her hand. She focused. The outside world disappeared. There was only the rhythm of her movements and the fragile heart before her. At hour 5, the second crisis struck. A vessel she had not anticipated began bleeding internally. The monitors reacted immediately. Sharp alarm tones filled the room. Pressure dropping, someone said. Elena did not look up. I see it. Blood pooled where it should not. She moved quickly but without panic. Clamp. Stitch. Secure. Her hands did not shake. Stabilizing, the anesthesiologist reported. The alarm softened. The bleeding slowed. She continued. By hour 7, exhaustion had begun to settle into her shoulders, but she ignored it. She had learned long ago that fatigue could not be allowed to speak during surgery. Then the monitor line went flat. Silence fell over the room. 7 seconds. 7 long seconds. Clear, Elena said. The first shock passed through his body. Nothing. Again. Clear. The second shock jolted him. The monitor stuttered. A weak rhythm returned. It was uneven, fragile, but it was there. Elena leaned slightly closer and whispered under her breath, so only he could hear. Fight. The rhythm strengthened slowly. At hour 8, another danger approached. His blood pressure began dropping again, more gradually this time but no less dangerous. Pressure declining, the anesthesiologist warned. How much blood remains? Elena asked. 2 units. Prepare more. Her movements were steady. She adjusted medication, reinforced sutures, corrected small irregularities. She did not rush. She did not argue with the moment. She let the stress move through her and kept working. Pressure stabilizing, came the report several minutes later. Elena gave a small nod and continued. Time blurred. At 9 hours and 14 minutes, she closed the final layer. Procedure complete, she said quietly. The room released a collective breath. Elena stepped away from the table and removed her gloves. Only then did she notice the slight tremor in her hands. Not fear. Not doubt. Just the weight of sustained concentration. She walked into a quiet corner of the operating room and allowed herself one slow breath. Then she left. Madame Kang Soo-jin was waiting in the corridor, sitting perfectly straight. When Elena stepped out, the older woman rose immediately. He is alive, Elena said simply. The surgery was successful. He needs rest and careful monitoring. For a moment, Soo-jin did not speak. Then, to Elena's surprise, she lowered herself to her knees. Thank you, she said. Elena stood still. The sight was unexpected, a powerful woman kneeling in gratitude. She reached down and gently took Soo-jin's hands. Please stand, Elena said quietly. He still needs you strong. Soo-jin allowed herself to be helped up. Elena adjusted her coat. The night outside remained dark and heavy with rain. But inside the silent building, a heart that had stopped beating had begun again. And for now that was enough. Adrian Kang woke on the second morning with pain sitting heavily in his chest and anger already forming in his mind. His eyes opened slowly but his thoughts were sharp. He did not wake gently. He never had. The first thing he noticed was the ceiling. Clean white. Too clean. The second thing he noticed was the steady sound of machines around him. Monitors. Oxygen. The faint mechanical rhythm of controlled recovery. He shifted slightly and felt the tight pull across his chest. Surgery. He remembered flashes, darkness, pressure, falling. He remembered almost nothing else. Then he saw his mother. Madame Kang Soo-jin sat in a chair near the window, perfectly straight, hands folded in her lap. She had not slept much. He could see it in the small shadows beneath her eyes. But her posture was composed. Adrian studied the room carefully. No unnecessary movement. 2 guards outside the door. Curtains half drawn. Safe. Controlled. What did you do? He asked. His voice was rough from dryness but steady. Soo-jin looked at him calmly. I saved your life. That is not what I asked. There was no warmth in his tone. Only suspicion. She stood and walked closer to the bed. I found a surgeon willing to operate. He held her gaze. And? She paused. I made arrangements. The word hung in the air. His jaw tightened. What arrangements? Soo-jin did not hesitate. I promised her something. What? Silence filled the space between them. Adrian's eyes sharpened. His instincts were always alert even now when his body was weak. I told her that if she saved you, Soo-jin said, I would make you marry her. The room seemed to grow smaller. Adrian stared at his mother, his expression hardening. You promised me? He said quietly. Like I was an object. Like I was a piece in a trade. I made a proposal, she replied evenly. You offered me, he said, his voice rising slightly. Like property. The monitor beside him beeped a little faster. Soo-jin did not raise her voice. You were dying. That does not give you the right. He tried to push himself upright, ignoring the tight pain in his chest. The movement was slow and careful, but his anger moved faster than his body. "Who is she?" he demanded. "The surgeon," Sujin said. "I want to see her." Sujin studied him for a moment. Then she nodded and stepped toward the door. A guard appeared immediately. "Bring Dr. Laurent," she instructed. Minutes later, Elena Laurent entered the room. She looked composed, holding a patient chart in her hands. There were faint signs of exhaustion in her eyes, but her posture was straight. Adrian looked at her carefully. This was the woman who had operated on him. "How much did my mother pay you?" he asked without greeting. Elena did not react immediately. She placed the chart on the small table beside his bed. "Nothing," she said. He watched her closely. "Then what did she promise you?" "She offered something," Elena replied calmly. "And you accepted?" "I accepted the surgery." His eyes narrowed. "The marriage?" "I refused it." He studied her face for signs of dishonesty. He found none. "She told me she offered you my name, my position, my world." "She did," Elena said evenly. "And I made it very clear I am not interested." Adrian shifted slightly, wincing as pain tugged at his chest. "I do not care about your explanations," he said. "This arrangement." "Your heart rate is elevated," Elena interrupted, glancing at the monitor. "I am not discussing my heart." "I am," she said firmly. "Because that is my responsibility." He stared at her, surprised by the interruption. "I don't care about your responsibility," he said. "You should," Elena replied. "You are alive because of it." Silence filled the room. "You expect me to believe you turned down what my mother offered?" he asked. "I do not expect you to believe anything," she said. "I expect you to take your medication and allow your body to recover." His voice sharpened. "You saved my life and you want nothing?" "I saved your life because you were dying," she answered. He let out a short breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "No one does anything for nothing." Her eyes flashed. "I am a surgeon," she said, her voice steady but firm. "Not a fortune hunter. Not someone waiting to attach herself to power." He watched her carefully. "You think I would sell myself for a proposal made in a moment of desperation?" she continued. "I have built my career without your family's help. I do not need your money." He opened his mouth to respond, but she spoke first. "You have spent the first minutes of your recovery questioning my integrity instead of acknowledging the work that was done to keep you alive." Her tone was not loud, but it carried weight. Adrian's hand moved unconsciously toward his chest, resting lightly over the surgical area. Elena noticed immediately. "Pain level?" she asked, her voice shifting instantly. He blinked, caught off guard by the sudden change. "It's manageable," he said. She stepped closer and adjusted the monitor slightly. "You should not sit up without support yet." The tension in the room softened just slightly. She met his eyes again. "Your mother and I were both placed in a situation neither of us asked for," she said quietly. "You were unconscious. I was brought here without full consent." He said nothing. "I understand your anger," she continued, "but it is misplaced. I did not come here seeking marriage. I came because you needed surgery." He studied her face. "You were forced into this?" he asked. "Yes." A long pause. "I am sorry for that," she added calmly. The apology was simple. Not dramatic. Not emotional. He leaned back slowly against his pillow, careful not to strain his chest. The anger that had filled the room moments earlier did not disappear, but it changed shape. It became quieter. Less sharp. "You refused her," he said again, almost as if testing the statement. "I did." "Completely?" "Yes." He looked at the ceiling for a moment, then back at her. "Why?" "Because my work is not for sale." Another silence. The monitor continued its steady rhythm. Adrian did not speak for several seconds. His eyes moved slightly as if thinking through something new. Elena stepped back toward the small table. "You will need an echocardiogram in 48 hours, she said in a normal clinical tone. "Your recovery depends on discipline." He did not respond immediately. Then quietly he said, "You speak to me as if I am ordinary." "In this room," she said, "you are simply a patient." He absorbed that. The fury that had woken with him that morning did not vanish. But it was no longer aimed at her. He lay still, his breathing steadying. Elena picked up the chart. "If you have further concerns," she said calmly, "we can discuss them after your vitals stabilize." She turned to leave. "Doctor," he said. She paused. He did not look at her directly this time. His gaze rested somewhere distant. He said nothing more. But the silence that followed was no longer hostile. It was thoughtful. On the 5th day after the surgery, the atmosphere inside Eclipse's private medical pavilion felt different. Adrian's condition had stabilized, but the building did not relax. Guards remained at every entrance. Vehicles came and went quietly. The tension was no longer about whether he would live. It was about what would happen next. That morning, Madame Kang Soo-jin called a private meeting. In a large conference room on the upper floor, the senior leaders of the Kang Dominion gathered around a long dark table. Men and women who managed finances, security, territory, and strategy sat in silence. Their expressions were controlled, but their eyes were sharp. They all knew that Adrian's injury had shaken the structure of power. Soo-jin stood at the head of the table. "My son is recovering," she said calmly. The surgery was successful. There was a quiet release of breath around the table, but no one spoke. "However," she continued, "our enemies are watching. They are measuring how quickly we respond. They are calculating whether this moment is weakness." Everyone understood the meaning behind her words. "The Obsidian Circle has already increased movement in the eastern sector," she said. "The Red Phoenix cartel has contacted 2 of our former allies. The Iron Crescent is silent. Silence is never harmless." She let that settle. "We will not appear unstable," she said firmly. Effective immediately, Adrian Kang is formally engaged to Dr. Elena Laurent. The room shifted. No one questioned her aloud. No one laughed. No one objected. They simply absorbed the information. Soo-jin continued in the same steady tone. "The engagement will be public, visible, strong. It will signal continuity and alliance. It will signal that our leadership stands secure." Director Min Jae-hyun gave a small nod. The message was clear. This was not about romance. It was about power. Within the hour, the announcement began to circulate quietly through controlled channels. Then it reached public media platforms connected to business networks and political observers. Elena Laurent was reviewing patient notes in a private office when her phone vibrated. She glanced down casually. Then she froze. A news alert filled her screen. Kang Dominion heir Adrian Kang announces engagement to renowned surgeon Elena Laurent. She stared at the words for several long seconds. Her heart did not race. Her face did not change. But her jaw tightened slightly. She stood up immediately and walked down the corridor toward Soo-jin's private sitting room. She did not knock. Soo-jin was pouring tea when Elena entered. "You announced it," Elena said evenly. "Yes," Soo-jin replied without looking surprised. "You had no right." Soo-jin set the teapot down gently. "Sit. I will stand. As you wish." Elena held her phone up slightly. "You made this public without speaking to me." Soo-jin folded her hands calmly. "The Obsidian Circle is probing our operations. The Red Phoenix cartel has begun forming quiet partnerships. The Iron Crescent is waiting for instability. And this is your solution?" Elena asked. "Yes." Elena crossed her arms. "You turned me into a political statement." "You are already involved," Soo-jin said quietly. "You saved him. That fact is known to the inner circle. Your presence is already linked to his survival. That does not mean I agreed to this." Soo-jin nodded slightly. "You did not." A brief silence passed. "This engagement," Soo-jin continued, "creates the image of strength. It shows that Adrian stands secure, that there is alliance, that there is continuity." "I am not a shield," Elena said firmly. "No," Soo-jin agreed. "You are a stabilizing force." Elena shook her head. "This is manipulation. It is strategy." Their eyes held. 30 days, Soo-jin said after a moment. 3 public appearances. That is all I ask." Elena did not respond immediately. "After that," Soo-jin continued, "you are free to walk away. The announcement will have served its purpose." "And if I refuse?" Elena asked. Soo-jin did not hesitate. "The factions will test us. They will interpret instability. My son is still healing. Conflict now would place everyone at risk." Elena understood the meaning behind the words. This was not just about public image. It was about timing. She looked down briefly, thinking. 30 days, she repeated. "Yes." "And 3 appearances." "Yes." Elena exhaled slowly. "I will not pretend," she said finally. Soo-jin's expression did not change. "I do not ask you to. I will not act affectionate. I will not smile for cameras as if this is a love story. That is acceptable. And when this ends, it ends completely." Soo-jin nodded once. "Agreed." Elena lowered her phone. "This is not consent. It is compromise." "I understand," Soo-jin replied. Elena turned and left the room. Later that afternoon, Adrian learned about the announcement. He was sitting upright in his recovery suite when one of his security aides informed him quietly. For a moment he said nothing. Then his eyes hardened. He requested his mother immediately. Sujin entered the room calmly. "You made it public," he said without greeting. "Yes." "You turned this into a declaration." "Yes." He stared at her. "You did not consult me. You were recovering. That does not remove my authority." "You are still recovering," she replied calmly. "The Dominion requires stability. I do not need marriage to prove stability." "No," she agreed. "But perception matters." His breathing remained controlled, though tension filled the space. "You will retract it," he said. "No." The word was simple. Final. "If we withdraw now," she continued, "it signals weakness. We will maintain the engagement for 30 days. His jaw tightened. "You expect me to stand beside a woman I barely know and present unity? For 30 days. He looked away briefly, calculating. After a long pause he said, "And what does she say?" "She has agreed." That caught him off guard. "She agreed?" he repeated. "To the conditions," Sujin clarified. He absorbed that. Later that evening, Elena entered his suite. "I assume you've seen the news," she said calmly. "Yes." "I did not consent to the announcement," she added. "I know." They stood facing each other in silence for a moment. "This is temporary," she said. 30 days. 3 appearances. He nodded once. "So I am told." She crossed her arms slightly. "I will not act like a bride," she said. "No staged affection. No public displays meant to sell a story." "That was never my intention," he replied. "And I will not be presented as decoration," she continued. "I am not an accessory to your power." His eyes met hers. "You will not be," he said. "If at any moment this turns into spectacle," she added, "I walk away." He studied her carefully. "You are not easily managed," he observed. "That is correct." A faint pause passed between them. "Very well," Adrian said at last. 30 days. He did not smile. She did not either. The agreement was not warm. It was not romantic. But it was clear. Outside the building, the city continued its steady movement. Inside, 2 people stood bound by a decision neither of them had chosen, preparing to play roles for reasons neither fully liked. And for the next 30 days the world would be watching. The days that followed the public announcement did not become easier, but they became quieter. Every morning, Elena Laurent walked down the same corridor toward Adrian Kang's recovery suite. The guards outside the door stepped aside when they saw her. They did not speak much. They had learned that she did not respond to unnecessary conversation. Inside the room, Adrian would already be awake. The first few mornings after the announcement had been tense. He had watched her closely as if expecting hidden motives. She had spoken to him with the same tone she used for any patient, calm, direct, focused on medical facts. There had been sharp edges in their exchanges, small flashes of irritation that surfaced and disappeared quickly. But by the end of the first week, something subtle began to change. "Pain level?" she asked one morning, checking the monitor. "Lower than yesterday," he replied. He no longer challenged her questions. He no longer interrupted when she discussed medication adjustments. He listened. She adjusted the 4-line carefully and noted the improvement in his breathing pattern. "Your heart rhythm is stabilizing well. That means you are healing. But it also means you need to follow the plan exactly." "I am following it," he said. There was no sarcasm in his voice. She glanced at him briefly, noticing the difference. Adrian had always been disciplined. Recovery became another form of discipline. He sat upright when required. He practiced slow breathing exercises. He did not remove monitors without permission. He did not ignore medication schedules. Elena remained the same. She did not soften her tone for his status. She did not show nervousness in front of him. When she entered a room full of his guards or advisors, she walked with the same steady pace she had in any hospital. She never lowered her voice. She never waited for permission to speak. One afternoon, while she was reviewing his chart in the corner of his suite, 3 senior members of the Kang Dominion entered for a strategy briefing. Director Min Jae-hyun led them. They stood around Adrian's bed and began speaking about territory reports and financial adjustments. Elena remained seated with her notes, silent but present. After a few minutes, Director Min's eyes shifted toward her. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately," he suggested carefully. He did not say her name. He did not look directly at her. But the meaning was clear. The room fell into a brief silence. Adrian's expression did not change. He looked at Director Min steadily. "Continue," he said. Director Min hesitated for half a second. "Sir." "Continue," Adrian repeated, his tone firm but not raised. The message was unmistakable. Elena did not look up. She kept her focus on the chart, though she was aware of the shift in the room. Director Min resumed speaking. The briefing continued with Elena sitting quietly in the same space. No one asked her to leave again. When the advisors finally exited, the room felt different. Adrian watched her from across the space. "You did not need to stay," he said. "I was not asked to leave," she replied calmly. "You heard information not meant for outsiders." "I heard strategy," she said. "It is not my concern." He studied her face. There was no curiosity there. No excitement. No fear. Only indifference to the power conversation. "You are not curious?" he asked. "About what?" she said, closing the chart. "About the structure of the Dominion." "No," she replied simply. "My concern is the structure of your heart." For a brief second, the corner of his mouth almost moved. Almost. Their exchanges became like that, controlled, measured, but no longer hostile. There were still moments of tension. One morning she corrected him when he attempted to stand without support. "You are not cleared for that yet," she said firmly. "I can manage," he replied. "You can damage internal sutures," she responded. "Sit." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he sat. Not because she commanded him as a superior, but because he recognized competence when he saw it. She noticed that recognition. The hostility that had filled their first confrontation had faded. It had not disappeared completely, but it no longer dominated the space. In its place was something steadier. They were still two strong personalities. They still disagreed on tone. They still observed each other carefully. But their words no longer struck like weapons. They landed like tools. One evening, after finishing a medication adjustment, Elena stood near the window of his suite. The city lights flickered in the distance. "You are healing faster than expected," she said. "That surprises you?" he asked. "No," she replied. "You are stubborn. That helps." He looked at her more directly then. "You speak plainly," he said. "It saves time. Most people do not speak to me that way. Most people are not responsible for your recovery." He absorbed that. There was no flirtation in the exchange. No softness. But there was no hostility either. The emotional friction between them had changed shape. It was no longer sharp and defensive. It was steady, contained. Like two strong materials pressed together, not breaking but testing. Adrian noticed something else during those days. Elena never made herself smaller in his presence. She did not step back when he held her gaze. She did not adjust her voice to sound gentle. She did not appear impressed by the environment around her. When she walked through corridors filled with guards and staff, she moved as if she belonged there, not because she claimed authority but because she claimed herself. That steadiness unsettled him slightly. It also intrigued him. On another morning, after completing a physical assessment, she placed the stethoscope back into her bag. "You will need one more imaging test before I adjust your medication again," she said. "Schedule it," he replied. There was no argument. No sarcasm. No edge. Just cooperation. The silence that followed felt natural rather than strained. Director Min entered briefly later that day with additional reports. This time he did not glance at Elena or suggest privacy. He began speaking directly as if her presence required no explanation. Adrian noticed that too. The shift was subtle but clear. Elena had not demanded space. She had simply occupied it. And the room had adjusted around her. By the end of the week, their conversations had lost the sharpness of their first meeting. The tension between them remained, but it no longer carried anger. It carried awareness. Neither of them spoke about it. Neither of them defined it. But something steady had formed where hostility once stood. Controlled friction. Not warmth. Not ease. But balance. The evening air outside Eclipse's private medical pavilion was cool and still. The rain from earlier in the week had stopped, leaving the pavement dark and reflective under the streetlights. Elena Laurent stepped out of the main entrance with her coat draped neatly over her shoulders and her medical bag in her hand. Her assigned driver waited several meters away near the black car. Two guards stood by the gate, alert but relaxed. The routine had become familiar. She would complete her final patient checks, review notes, and then leave for the night. She paused near the top of the steps to check her phone. A message from the fellowship coordinator blinked on the screen. She began typing a short response. The quiet was broken by the low rumble of engines. Elena looked up. Two dark vehicles turned onto the private road leading to the facility. They were not part of the usual security rotation. They moved slowly at first, then more deliberately. The guards near the gate stiffened. Elena slipped her phone into her pocket. The first vehicle stopped sharply at the base of the steps. The second positioned itself slightly behind it, blocking the exit route. Doors opened quickly. 4 men stepped out. Their movements were controlled, purposeful. One of the guards reached for his communication device, but the men were already moving. "Doctor," one of the attackers said sharply. Elena did not respond. Her mind had already shifted from surprise to calculation. One man moved toward her from the left. Another from the right. She tightened her grip on her medical bag. When the first attacker reached for her arm, she swung the bag hard and fast. It connected with the side of his head with a solid impact. He staggered backward, surprised. The second man lunged. She stepped sideways and struck again, this time aiming lower. The bag hit his shoulder. Not enough to stop him fully, but enough to slow him. "Move!" one of the attackers shouted. They tried to grab her at the same time. She twisted away, pulling free from a hand that caught her sleeve. The fabric tore slightly, but she remained upright. The guards at the gate had drawn their weapons now. Reinforcements from inside the building were already running toward the scene. The attackers hesitated. That hesitation was enough. Within seconds, 3 Dominion guards closed in. One tackled an attacker to the ground. Another forced a second man against the vehicle. The remaining 2 were disarmed and restrained quickly. The entire incident lasted less than a minute. Elena stood still, breathing evenly. Her heart beat fast, but her face remained composed. One of the attackers lay on the pavement, groaning. Blood streamed from a deep cut along his forehead where her bag had struck him. A Dominion guard moved toward him, weapon still drawn. "Leave him," the guard said. Elena stepped forward. "He's bleeding," she said. "He tried to take you," the guard replied. "He's bleeding," she repeated. Without waiting for permission, she knelt beside the man. She opened her medical bag and pulled out gauze and a small flashlight. The attacker stared up at her, confused and angry. "Why are you helping him?" one of the guards demanded. She ignored the question and pressed gauze against the wound. Blood soaked through quickly. "Light," she said. The guard hesitated, then switched on his phone flashlight and aimed it toward the man's head. Elena examined the cut carefully. It was deep but not life-threatening. She applied pressure with steady hands. The attacker muttered something under his breath. One of the guards translated coldly. "He wants to know why you're helping him." Elena did not look away from her work. "Because he is injured," she said simply. She adjusted the gauze and secured it firmly. "It's a professional reflex," she added. The man blinked at her, confused. She tied off the bandage and sat back slightly. "Tell him," she said calmly, "that if he comes near me again, I will not be this patient." The guard translated. The attacker looked away. Elena rose slowly to her feet. The Dominion guards had already secured the other men and were moving them toward the vehicles. One of the guards approached her cautiously. "Are you hurt?" "No," she replied, brushing dust from her coat. "Just a torn sleeve." Her breathing had steadied fully now. From the upper level of the facility, a window overlooked the entrance. Behind the glass, Adrian Kong stood watching. He had been reviewing reports when the sudden movement below caught his attention. He stepped toward the window and saw the 2 unfamiliar vehicles. He saw the men approach her. He could not move fast. His body was still recovering. But he watched every second. He saw her swing the bag without hesitation. He saw her avoid their grasp. He saw his guards intervene. And then he saw something that held his attention even more. He saw her kneel. He saw her treat the wound of the man who had just attempted to abduct her. He did not understand it at first. Power in his world was answered with force. Threats were neutralized. Enemies were not tended to. Yet she had not hesitated. She had moved with the same calm precision she used in the operating room. He remained at the window long after the attackers were taken away. Below, Elena spoke briefly with one of the security officers. Her posture was straight. She did not appear shaken. She collected her medical bag and walked toward the entrance again, escorted by guards. The scene returned to quiet as quickly as it had erupted. Adrian rested his hand lightly against the cool glass. He replayed the moment in his mind. She had not screamed. She had not begged. She had fought. And then she had healed. The duality unsettled him. Down below, Elena paused briefly at the doorway. She glanced once at the dark street where the vehicles had been. Then she stepped back inside the building. The night resumed its silence, but something had shifted. The attack had failed. And the image of her kneeling beside a bleeding enemy lingered in his mind long after the lights outside dimmed. That night, the building was quieter than usual. After the attempted abduction, security had tightened around Eclipse's private medical pavilion. Guards rotated in shorter shifts. Doors locked faster. Voices stayed low in the corridors. Adrian sat in the chair beside the window of his recovery suite instead of lying in bed. He had been instructed to rest, but rest did not come easily to him. His body was healing. His mind was not still. He replayed the scene outside over and over. The swing of the medical bag. The moment of resistance. The kneeling. He pressed the call button beside him. A guard entered almost immediately. "I want to see Dr. Laurent," Adrian said. The guard hesitated. "Now?" "Yes." The request was delivered without command, but it carried weight. A few minutes later, Elena entered the room. She looked composed, though the tear in her sleeve had been replaced with a fresh coat. Her expression was neutral. "You wanted to see me?" she asked. "Yes," Adrian said. She remained standing. He studied her face for a moment before speaking. "The man you treated," he began, "was sent to take you." "I am aware," she replied. "You still stopped his bleeding." "Yes." "Why?" She did not hesitate. "Because he was bleeding." "That does not answer the question." "It does," she said calmly. "In that moment he was an injured person. That is what I respond to." "He was your enemy." "I do not have enemies," she replied. "I have patients and non-patients." For a brief time he was a patient. Adrian leaned back slightly. "You are aware of what world you are standing in," he said. "Yes." "And you do not adjust your principles for it?" "No." He watched her carefully. "That is either very naive," he said slowly, "or very strong." She met his gaze without flinching. "I have heard both before," she answered. A brief silence settled between them. "I saw you fight," he added. "You did not freeze." "I did not plan to be taken," she said simply. He almost smiled, but the expression did not fully form. "You can go," he said after a moment. She nodded once and left. The corridor lights dimmed later that night as the building shifted into its quieter hours. Elena had returned to her assigned suite, showered, and attempted to rest. But her mind remained alert. The image of Adrian standing at the window earlier had stayed with her. So had the look in his eyes when he asked why she helped the attacker. Near midnight, she found herself walking back down the hallway without fully deciding to. She paused outside his door and knocked softly. "Come in," his voice answered. He was still awake. She stepped inside. "I could not sleep," she said plainly. "Neither could I," he replied. She took the chair across from him. For a moment, neither spoke. The lights in the room were low. The city beyond the window glowed faintly in the distance. "My chest feels tight," he said after a moment. "That is normal," she answered. "Inflammation. It will ease." He nodded. "I remember something," he said quietly. She looked at him. "During the surgery." Her expression shifted slightly. "You were unconscious," she said carefully. "I know," he replied. "But I remember a voice." She remained silent. "You told me to fight." She did not deny it. "Yes," she said softly. "I did." He held her gaze. "I heard it," he said. "Or I believed I heard it." She leaned back slightly in her chair. "You were close to losing rhythm," she explained. "There is a point where the body begins to surrender. I recognized it." "You spoke to me?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I was not finished," she said simply. "You had not finished." He absorbed that. "I lost consciousness once," he continued. "And the last thing I heard was your voice telling me to come back." The room felt smaller suddenly. "I do not have people who say that," he said. She studied him quietly. "People around me follow orders," he went on. "They are loyal. They are efficient. But no one stands in the dark and tells me to return." His voice was not dramatic. It was factual. "I have lost people," he said after a pause. "Some were taken from me. Others I pushed away." She did not interrupt. "The ones taken," he continued, "hurt. The ones I pushed away stay longer." Silence filled the space again. "How long was I gone?" he asked. 7 seconds, she replied. He looked at her. "Flatline?" "Yes." He processed that quietly. "I shocked you once," she said. It did not respond. He waited. The second shock restored rhythm. She did not mention fear. She did not mention panic. Only facts. I refuse to let you go, she added quietly. He watched her closely. You did not know me, he said. You were my patient, she answered. That is not what I mean. She paused. I had been inside your chest for 7 hours, she said at last. After that it becomes personal. He absorbed her words slowly. The silence between them was no longer sharp or tense. It felt exposed. I do not want a contract wife, he said after a while. She did not react immediately. I do not want someone standing beside me because of arrangement or obligation, he continued. She met his eyes. I want someone who chooses me, he said plainly. Her expression did not soften, but something in her posture shifted slightly. That is reasonable, she replied. He held her gaze. Is it? He asked. Yes, she said. Another silence followed, deeper this time. Outside, the city continued its quiet movement. Inside, 2 people sat in a room lit by dim lamps and distant light. No contracts were discussed. No politics. Only truth spoken simply. After a while, Elena stood. You should rest, she said. So should you, he replied. She paused at the door. 7 seconds, he said quietly. Yes. He nodded once. She left without another word. Adrian remained seated by the window long after the door closed, thinking about a voice in the dark that had told him to fight, and about what it meant to be chosen. The file was thicker than the others. Elena Laurent sat alone in a quiet office inside Eclipse's private medical pavilion, reviewing Adrian Kang's full medical history as part of her final recovery assessment. The room was silent except for the soft turning of paper. She had already gone through the surgical notes, the childhood cardiology reports, and the medication history. Everything had been documented carefully. Then she reached an older section. 7 years ago. Harbor District, Nareth Port. Emergency intervention. Stab wound. Treated at Harbor District Free Clinic. Elena's fingers paused on the page. Her eyes moved slowly across the details. Location. Date. Description of injury. The room felt suddenly smaller. 7 years ago, she had been in Nareth Port for a short volunteer medical rotation during her advanced training. The Harbor District Clinic had been small, crowded, and underfunded. She remembered the long nights and the narrow hallways. And she remembered one night clearly. It had been raining that evening too. 2 armed men had brought in an injured patient. They had not given a name. They had not explained what happened. The man was losing blood. The atmosphere in the room had shifted immediately. The attending doctor had taken one look at the weapons and quietly disappeared into another room. The nurses had hesitated. Elena had been 27. Young but trained. Terrified but focused. She had stepped forward. She remembered the smell of metal and antiseptic. The way the man's breathing had been uneven. The deep cut across his side. She had not seen his face clearly. The lights had been dim. He had turned his head away. She had worked quickly. Stitched carefully. Applied pressure where needed. Her hands had moved without shaking, even though her heart had pounded in her ears. The armed men had stood nearby, silent and tense. She had finished closing the wound and monitored him until his breathing stabilized. At one point his heart rhythm had weakened. She had leaned closer and said one word softly. Fight. He had drifted back into steady rhythm. The next morning he had been gone. No name. No thank you. No explanation. She had wondered about him sometimes. Whether he had survived. Whether he had returned to whatever dangerous world he had come from. Now she looked down at the record in her hands. The age matched. The injury description matched. The date matched. Adrian Kang. Elena closed the file slowly. Her mind was steady, but something deep inside her shifted. She stood up and walked down the corridor toward Adrian's suite. He was standing near the window when she entered, facing the city. We need to talk, she said. He turned, reading her expression immediately. What is it? He asked. She held out the file. Harbor District, she said. His brow tightened slightly. Nareth Port, she continued. 7 years ago. His eyes sharpened. I treated a stab wound there, she said. Late at night. Armed men. The doctor left. He stepped closer slowly. I was 27, she went on. I stayed. Silence. You were that patient, she said quietly. He did not speak at first. Then something moved across his face. Recognition. Calculation. Memory rising slowly. I remember the room, he said at last. I remember the smell. She waited. I remember hands, he continued slowly. Small. Steady. She felt a strange calm. And a voice, he said. Telling me to fight. She met his eyes. Yes, she said. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of something neither of them could name easily. You saved me, he said. Twice, she replied. He exhaled slowly. My mother, he said. Yes. He understood immediately. Later that morning, Adrian went to find Madame Kang Sujin. She was seated in her private sitting room, tea placed carefully beside her. You knew, he said calmly. She did not pretend confusion. Yes. You traced her, he said. Yes. How long? Since that night, she answered. He stood still, processing. I asked questions, she continued. The clinic was small. Records were limited. It took time. But I found her. And when I was shot, he said slowly, you brought her. I brought the best surgeon, she replied. And the woman who had already chosen to stay once when she had no reason to. He looked at her carefully. You built this, he said. I recognized the threat, she answered. I did not create it. He did not argue. Later that afternoon, Adrian asked Elena to meet him in the garden behind the facility. The winter air was cool. The trees were bare, waiting for spring. She sat on a wooden bench when he approached. He did not bring guards. He did not bring papers. He brought a small box. She looked at it. This is not my mother's arrangement, he said quietly. He opened it. Inside was a simple ring. Elegant. Understated. I am not asking because of politics, he continued. Or because of obligation. She remained still. You saved my life 7 years ago when you did not know my name, he said. You saved it again here. He took a slow breath. You stayed when others left. She watched him carefully. I do not want a contract, he said. I do not want a symbol. He met her eyes fully. I want you. The garden was silent. She looked down at the ring, then back at him. I don't marry crime bosses, she said. He did not look surprised. Pause. A long one. Then she added quietly, but I might marry Adrian Kang. Something open and unguarded passed across his face. He did not move immediately. Neither did she. They sat in the winter light, the air still around them. Above them, in a window overlooking the garden, Madame Kang Sujin watched quietly. She did not smile broadly. Only a small, satisfied curve touched her lips before she stepped back from the glass. In the garden, 2 people sat with a ring between them and a future not yet decided. The world outside still contained rivals. Threats. Power struggles waiting in silence. But for the moment there was only a choice. And this time it was not arranged. It was chosen. The next chapter would not be simple. The rivals had not disappeared. The engagement would bring new negotiations. And there were truths still unspoken. But for now the winter garden held its quiet. And somewhere beneath the cold branches, something real had begun. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more interesting stories.